Tired of feeling overwhelmed and unproductive? Wondering why something as simple as jotting down a list makes you feel oddly calmer? You're not alone, and there's real science behind that feeling. Welcome to the psychology of achievement through to-do lists, where your brain and a piece of paper become unlikely partners in progress. Unlock the power of your mind and unlock your potential with the revolutionary psychology of to-do lists. This video will reveal how a simple piece of paper can revolutionize your productivity and drive you to achieve your greatest goals. Imagine this: a quiet evening, low lamplight, your favorite pen in hand, and a notebook open to a clean page. You write down a few intentions for tomorrow: email Brian, return library books, pay the electric bill. And then, strange as it sounds, you feel lighter. A little more organized. A little more possible. You probably won't know this, but that tiny moment of list making is already engaging your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, prioritizing, and future-oriented thinking. And with that pen stroke, you've begun a subtle, science-backed mental shift from chaos to clarity. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. So, let's talk about the quiet power of paper plans. You probably assume the value of a to-do list comes from what it helps you accomplish. Tasks done, boxes checked, chaos wrangled into order. That's true, but it's not the whole story. What's wild is that even before you act on any of it, the very act of writing things down already begins rewiring your sense of control. Psychologists refer to this as externalizing intention. When you move your thoughts from the mental to the physical, taking ideas from your busy brain and anchoring them on paper, you reduce something called cognitive clutter. Think of it like taking 30 browser tabs out of your head and finally closing a few. In a famous 1920 study by Russian psychologist Bluma Zygarnik, yes, that Zygarnik, participants who began a task but didn't finish it were more likely to remember it than those who completed it. Her conclusion? The mind hates open loops. A to-do list, even an unfinished one, signals to the brain, "Don't worry, I've got this." You relieve the nagging anxiety of uncompleted intentions simply by logging them into the external world. That's why making a to-do list before bed can actually help you sleep better. A 2018 study from Baylor University found that people who wrote down tasks for the next few days fell asleep significantly faster than those who journaled about completed tasks. The clearer the list, the quicker the snooze. Apparently, your brain likes delegation. Here's something interesting. There's a fringe theory in cognitive psychology that claims the brain treats written tasks almost like micro-contracts. When you write, "Call the dentist," your brain starts to interpret that as a commitment, not just a suggestion. There's no formal agreement, no witnesses, just you and your notebook. But neurologically, it registers. And that subtle feeling of obligation? That's your achievement machinery quietly powering up. There remains considerable disagreement about why this sense of calm appears. Some argue it's a placebo effect. You believe it works, so it does. Others point to neurological deactivation in the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, when a plan is visually recorded. And others still believe the magic lies in narrative psychology. Writing down tasks helps you reclaim authorship over your story. And let's not forget the ritual aspect. That moment of sitting down, cracking open a planner or app, and asking, "Okay, what now?" is a pause point, a cue to shift from reactive to intentional. It's you saying, "Let's make meaning out of the mess." That's more than productivity, that's identity. Just a quirky detail, NASA astronauts use something eerily similar to a to-do list in space. Because in zero gravity, memory works differently, and the stakes are quite literally life or death. So instead of relying on their minds, they use what are called flight data files, extremely structured checklists that include even simple steps like open container or detach Velcro tab. Turns out, we're not so different from astronauts when Monday rolls around. But here's where it gets sneakier: you don't need to follow the list to feel its effects. Simply creating a plan activates parts of your brain associated with simulated completion. You imagine the task being done, and in doing so, lower your stress response. It's like tricking your brain into feeling victorious before the first victory. Of course, the brain isn't always rational. You might write down 12 things, ignore 11, complete 1, and still feel like a productivity guru. Why? Because the act of organizing itself satisfies an ancient craving, order in chaos. And you, my friend, just played conductor to your own mental symphony. And there's more. When you revisit your list throughout the day, you reinforce the intention-behavior loop. This is what I said I'd do. This is who I am. That's the building block of self-trust. And honestly, self-trust is harder to come by than any app feature or highlighter color system. So whether you write your list on the back of a receipt, in a $50 leather-bound journal, or on the Notes app titled, My Little Chaos, the power is the same. You're giving form to your mind's fog. That's not just productivity, that's peace. That shift in energy leads us into something else. What happens inside your mind when you actually hand off cognitive tasks to your environment? We're entering the world of cognitive offloading, and trust me, your brain's about to sigh in relief. So now your brain's handed over a few of those swirling thoughts to the safety of a page, or a screen. You've externalized them. You feel lighter, right? That sensation isn't imaginary. It's part of a deeper psychological process called cognitive offloading. And honestly, your brain is all for it. Cognitive offloading is when you use physical objects or digital tools to store and manage information so your brain doesn't have to. Like using GPS instead of memorizing directions, or setting a calendar reminder so you don't forget your cousin's wedding. To-do lists are a classic form of this offloading. You're outsourcing your brain's working memory to, well, anything with ink or pixels. And that's important, because your working memory, essentially the brain's scratch pad, has limited space. Most people can juggle about 7 things at once, give or take 2. That's it. After that, the system slows, errors increase, and you start doing that thing where you walk into a room and forget why you're there. The list isn't just helpful, it's necessary. A mainstream study by Dr. David Meyer at the University of Michigan highlights this bottleneck. He found that when people multitask or try to retain multiple pieces of information mentally, their cognitive efficiency drops dramatically. Like, up to 40%. But when they use external tools like checklists or notepads, that drop is softened or avoided entirely. And here's the twist, offloading doesn't make you lazier. It actually makes you smarter in how you use your brain. Think of your mind like a high-performance processor. If you're overloading it with storage tasks, you're not leaving space for creativity, analysis, or insight. The to-do list is like clearing your desktop so your system can run what really matters. An odd but true fact, in one experiment, students who physically wrote out what they needed to remember for a future test performed better even when they didn't look at the list again. It's as if the act of writing triggered deeper encoding in their brain. Like a little brain tattoo that said, "Don't worry, I've got this." And there remains considerable disagreement about how much offloading is too much. Some scholars warn that we're becoming over-reliant on lists, calendars, and tech, and that it might weaken our natural memory over time. Others argue the opposite, that smart offloading actually frees memory space and boosts performance. The debate's alive and well, but for now, your planner is probably not the villain. Now, let's zoom in on what happens emotionally when you offload. It's subtle, but real. You know that feeling when everything's a jumble in your head, but once you write it out, it feels like it shrinks by half? That's not just perception, it's emotional load balancing. Your limbic system, the part of your brain responsible for emotion, doesn't love clutter. It interprets too many open tasks as potential threats. But when you reduce your to-dos to a linear, visual form, it calms that system down. You're telling your brain, see? There's structure. No tigers, no fires. We're good. In fact, therapists sometimes recommend list making as a form of anxiety regulation. You're not just organizing your day, you're organizing your nervous system. Here's something interesting. Researchers at Cornell once observed that surgeons who used detailed pre-surgery checklists not only made fewer mistakes but also reported lower stress. It's not just about accuracy, it's about the calming power of knowing what's next. Your morning list may not involve scalpels, but the principle still applies. And it goes deeper. When your cognitive load is reduced, you enter what psychologists call a state of cognitive readiness. It's a sweet spot where your mind is prepped to perform without being overstimulated. Like when athletes go into the zone, or musicians hit flow state. You can't get there if your mental RAM is full of forgotten laundry and unanswered emails. So let's pause for a sec and imagine this in real life. You sit down with your list. 10 items. Some are easy. Some are hard. But instead of holding them all in your head like slippery fish, they're now laid out. You breathe easier. Your shoulders drop a little. Your mind, once buzzing, starts to settle. You're clearing runway space. And yes, there's even a bit of time distortion at play. When you list your tasks, you stop overestimating how much time each one will take. What once felt like, "I'll never get through all this," becomes, "Okay, this'll take about 45 minutes if I stop checking TikTok." Time becomes measurable again. Now, tiny joke incoming, this doesn't mean your brain is outsourcing everything. It's not like you can write down, "workout at 6 a.m., and expect your calves to rise independently from bed like trained dolphins. No list will do the work for you. But it prepares the mind, and that preparation is half the game. Also, let's not ignore how this plays into tech. With digital lists, like Todoist, Notion, or Apple Reminders, you can even automate offloading. Recurring tasks, priority flags, nested projects. You're building a second brain that nudges you at just the right moment. It's not cheating, it's intelligent delegation. Still, paper holds a different power. Studies suggest that handwritten tasks are remembered better and feel more personal. So while tech offers speed and sync, paper offers something more tactile, more rooted. That tactile feedback becomes part of the memory cue. You felt it, so you'll remember it. All of this loops back to one core idea: your to-do list isn't just a productivity tool. It's a memory prosthetic. You're not failing when you need one, you're adapting. And you're reducing the noise inside your skull so your real focus can take the stage. So next time you feel scattered, don't just try to remember it all. Don't force it. Write it down. Type it out. Drag it into a calendar. Your brain's not trying to betray you, it just needs a little help managing the modern world. And as your mind begins to clear, what follows naturally is motivation. That clean slate feeling, that subtle encouragement, that drive to actually do the things. And wouldn't you know, it all starts with a little squirt of dopamine every time you tick a box. Now that your brain feels a little lighter, like you've finally put down a few grocery bags you've been carrying around mentally, it starts craving that next small thrill. The one you get from crossing something off. Checking the box. Drawing that perfect line through a task like you're slashing through chaos itself. Let's talk about dopamine. Because yes, your to-do list is actually chemically addictive, in a good way. Dopamine is the brain's motivator molecule. It's often misrepresented as the pleasure chemical, but more accurately, it's about anticipation and reward. Every time you complete a task, no matter how small, your brain rewards you with a hit of dopamine. It says, "Well done. Let's do that again." Here's the kicker: your brain doesn't care how minor the task is. You could check off drink water or stretch for 30 seconds, and it'll still offer that satisfying little surge. This is why even adding things you've already done to your list and checking them off feels good. Come on, you've done that. Admit it. You wrote "shower" after the shower, just to scratch it off. Mainstream research from Columbia University has shown that the brain's dopamine system is highly responsive to progress markers. Not just goals achieved, but progress perceived. That's what a to-do list does so well. It creates a visible map of your forward motion, no matter how slow. This leads into what's known as the dopamine feedback loop. You complete a task, you feel good, and you want to feel good again. So you do another task. And then another. And pretty soon, you're deep in the productivity vortex, sipping tea and color-coding your way through life. Okay, maybe not that dramatic, but the loop is real. You might find this surprising. In video game design, the same psychological principles are used to keep you engaged. Developers create micro-rewards, small wins like coins, XP points, level-ups, that trigger dopamine in the same way. Your to-do list. It's the analog version of a well-designed RPG. Except instead of dragons, it's dentist appointments. Same wiring. Slightly less dramatic battles. There remains considerable disagreement among researchers about whether task completion actually causes dopamine release or whether it's the anticipation of completion that does it. Some argue we're more driven by what's next than what's done. Others insist that it's the moment of checking the box that lights up our reward centers. The truth? Probably both. The human brain, as always, is gloriously complicated. Let's bring this down to the everyday. Think about that moment when you finish a task that's been sitting there for days, maybe weeks. You've avoided it. Danced around it. And then finally, you do it. Maybe it's not even hard. Maybe it took 3 minutes. But the feeling? Euphoric. You walk lighter. You mentally high-five yourself. That's dopamine, my friend. It's not imaginary. It's chemical. And that's why short, achievable tasks matter. If your list is only write novel or launch business, your brain sees no progress, no reward. It's like asking a toddler to climb a mountain with no snacks. You need those little wins. Write for 10 minutes. Research one tool. Email one person. That's how momentum is built. In Japanese culture, there's a practice called kaizen, which means continuous improvement through small steps. One version of this? Do something for just 1 minute a day. That's it. The psychology behind it aligns perfectly with the dopamine loop. Low resistance, high reward, minimal dread. And it works, because it's built on progress, not perfection. Now, let's not pretend your brain's reward system is always your best friend. Sometimes it plays tricks. Like rewarding procrastination with instant pleasure, Netflix binges, anyone? Or making you feel productive by writing the list but never doing the list. We've all been there. The danger zone is when your list becomes a trophy case for intentions instead of a map for action. So how do you keep the loop honest? Start with actionable language. Write tasks as verbs: call, clean, draft, read. Your brain needs a cue to act, not just a vague wish. New blog post? That's an idea. Write first paragraph of blog post? That's a task. Big difference. Also, keep your tasks visible. If they live on your phone but disappear behind 6 swipes, you lose the loop. That's why paper lists still reign for many. You see it. You remember it. You get to slash through it with satisfying flair. Oh, and don't discount the aesthetic dopamine. You know what I mean. The thrill of a color-coded bullet journal. The high of perfectly symmetrical checkboxes. The way your planner smells like productivity and eucalyptus. Okay, maybe not eucalyptus, but close. Visual clarity contributes to that reward cycle. Clean design equals clean mind. There's also something to be said for time-stamping your wins. When you check something off, add the time you did it. Submit invoice, 3:17 p.m. That timestamps your effort. It grounds the achievement in your timeline. It also gives you a mini record of the day's progress, which reinforces the feedback loop the next day. Now, some people fear the list will become an obsession. That they'll start chasing checks instead of meaning. And yes, there's a dark side. Don't worry, we'll go there in section 13. But for now, recognize that you're not addicted to the list. You're responding to your brain's desire to feel purposeful. That's very human. And very okay. So, next time you complete something, pause. Feel that little internal, yes. That's your neurobiology thanking you. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be consistent. And as that dopamine glow fades, something else steps in, your sense of forward motion. Momentum. Because once that wheel starts rolling, your brain doesn't want it to stop. Which brings us straight into the next beautiful trick your list is playing on you, perceived progress. That satisfying checkmark you just made? It's doing more than just giving you a dopamine tickle, it's triggering something deeper, the illusion of momentum. And in this illusion lies one of the most powerful psychological drivers of achievement. See, your brain has a peculiar habit. It loves the idea of progress just as much as actual progress. Sometimes more. What matters is perception. As long as you feel like you're moving forward, you're more likely to keep going. And that's where your to-do list shines. You might sit down and tick off 3 tiny items: wash cup, reply, okay, to group chat, open work doc. Not exactly Herculean. But by the time you're done, your brain whispers, nice. We're productive today. And just like that, you're in motion. This effect is known as momentum bias. In cognitive psychology, momentum bias refers to our tendency to favor actions that sustain forward motion. When you perceive movement, any movement, you're more motivated to keep pushing. It's like catching a wave. You don't question how it started, you just ride it. A classic study by Teresa Amabile at Harvard Business School backs this up. She found that the single biggest motivator at work wasn't money, recognition, or praise. It was a sense of making progress in meaningful work. Not completion. Not success. Progress. Even small wins triggered higher engagement, creativity, and joy. So when your to-do list shows you that something's been done, even if it's tiny, your brain gets that progress hit. And that encourages the next action. And the next. It's like sneezing, once you start, the next one's inevitable. Here's a fun tidbit. In retail loyalty programs, customers are more likely to complete a 10-stamp coffee card if 2 stamps are already filled in, even though they still need 8. Why? Because it feels like progress. Some cafes even fake those first stamps. The psychology? 100% real. Your to-do list works the same way. That done section at the bottom, or the items crossed out in black ink, those are visual proof of momentum. They trick your brain into thinking you've got a head start. And honestly, who doesn't want to feel like they're already winning by 9 a.m.? There remains considerable disagreement among scholars about whether perceived progress leads to actual long-term achievement or just a short-term motivational sugar rush. Some argue that fake progress can be deceptive, making people feel accomplished without producing real results. Others suggest that small wins are essential scaffolding, helping people build the confidence and rhythm they need for bigger goals. Either way, the short-term effect is undeniable. Now, let's shift into the sensory side. You look at your list. There's something crossed out. It looks messy, but it feels better. You see what's been done, and that creates a sense of kinetic energy, like your day is rolling forward, not standing still. That's why visual design matters more than people admit. If your list is a random brain dump in 10 different colors, your brain might resist it. But if it's clean, simple, and has visible, done zones, your mind reads that like a map of progress. You're halfway there before the work even begins. You might also notice how much easier it is to do task number 2 once task number 1 is out of the way. That's not just because the first was hard, it's because the brain likes building chains. Psychologists call this the commitment consistency principle. Once you start behaving like someone who gets things done, your brain wants to maintain that identity. You're locked in. This is why starting with a small, achievable task first thing in the day can unlock serious momentum. Not because the task matters, but because the motion does. You go from static to kinetic, and your to-do list records that energy transfer in ink or pixels. Here's something interesting. People are more likely to complete a longer list if the first few items are extremely easy. Like, comically easy. Open laptop. Make coffee. This builds momentum bias by reinforcing a fast start. You trick your brain into thinking, wow, we're on fire today. And even if that fire is mostly steam from your mug, it still works. Of course, there's a flip side. Ever notice how a single undone task can paralyze you? One item. Just sitting there. Judging you. Mocking you from the list. That's because the illusion of momentum works both ways. If you feel stuck, even when you're not, your brain hesitates. This is where you can use list structure as a counterattack. Break down overwhelming tasks into micro steps. Write report becomes open report doc, write intro sentence, insert stats from email. Each one is a progress marker. Each one nudges momentum forward. And each one makes the whole thing less threatening. Here's the kicker, once you finish that micro task, you want to do the next one. Not because you suddenly love the project, but because momentum creates friction against stopping. The wheel's already turning. Your list becomes a runway, not a wall. That's why routines anchored by lists are so powerful. They carry built-in momentum. Morning lists lead into afternoon lists. Weekly resets turn into Sunday reviews. Each one builds off the last. It's rhythm, not force. And no, you don't need to feel productive all the time. That's not the point. The point is to create gentle, believable movement. One line. One checkbox. One decision. That's enough to begin. And once you begin, your brain does the rest. Now, little joke break, if only we could apply this principle to our laundry baskets, right? Fold one sock as a gateway drug to domestic bliss. Hey, stranger things have happened. In the end, your to-do list becomes a visual proof of motion. A story of small victories. And whether or not the motion is dramatic doesn't matter. Because in your mind, you're already halfway there. And that shift, from static overwhelm to dynamic progress, sets us up for a deeper dive into how your brain misjudges the work ahead. Yes, it's time to confront the eternal enemy of planners everywhere, the planning fallacy. So here you are, rolling forward on the magic carpet of momentum, your to-do list whispering sweet nothings like, just one more checkbox, and yet, somehow, despite your best intentions, it's 4 p.m. and task number 3 is still not done. You look back at your beautifully timed list and ask the age-old question, how did this take so long? Welcome to the planning fallacy, your brain's deeply ingrained, wildly overconfident tendency to underestimate how long tasks will take. And yes, it's messing with your list. Coined by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in the late 1970s, the planning fallacy is what happens when you say, I'll write this report in an hour, and 3 hours later you're still deciding which font to use. It's not laziness. It's psychology. Your brain, especially in planning mode, is irrationally optimistic. It sees the task, envisions the best-case scenario, ignores past delays, and says, we've got this. And your to-do list, innocent as it is, gets drafted under that same optimism. So you write down 6 tasks for the day when, realistically, you'll finish 2. Maybe. There's a mainstream study by Bueller, Griffin, and Ross that illustrates this beautifully. They asked students to predict when they'd finish their theses. The average prediction? Way too soon. Most students underestimated the time by over 30%. And even when asked to consider worst-case scenarios, they still guessed wrong. Your brain just refuses to learn. There remains considerable disagreement about why the planning fallacy is so persistent. Some researchers blame the inside view. You look at your future through rose-colored glasses, focusing on your intentions, not past outcomes. Others argue it's a cognitive bias rooted in ego. You want to believe you're efficient, even when your track record says otherwise. Here's something interesting. Professionals suffer from it just as much as students. Programmers, engineers, lawyers, people who should know better, routinely underestimate timelines. Even when you've done something 100 times, your brain still thinks you'll be faster this time. Spoiler, you won't be. So what does this have to do with your to-do list? Well, if you're not careful, your list becomes less of a productivity tool and more of a guilt delivery system. You write down 10 things, finish 3, and then feel like a failure, even though those 3 tasks took actual time and energy. You didn't fail. You just misjudged. This is why the most effective to-do lists include time awareness. That means assigning rough durations to each item. Write report, 90 minutes. Respond to emails, 30 minutes. Walk dog, 15 minutes. It sounds basic, but it changes everything. Suddenly, your list isn't just what you want to do, it's what you can realistically fit into your day. And here's where it gets spicy. Some productivity systems, like time blocking, are designed specifically to counter the planning fallacy. Instead of listing 10 things, you map each task onto your calendar. From 10 to 11, I'll do this. From 11 to 12, that. The list stops being wishful thinking and becomes spatial thinking. And your brain, finally, gets the memo. A fun twist, Elon Musk is infamous for what his team calls Elon time, wildly optimistic internal deadlines that everyone quietly doubles in their heads. It's the planning fallacy in full swing, turbocharged by ambition. The difference? His teams have adapted. They treat his time estimates like enthusiastic fan fiction. Now, you might be thinking, but I don't want a time block every hour. Fair. You don't need to go full spreadsheet monk. Even just estimating durations next to each task helps retrain your brain. Over time, you start seeing patterns. Oh, calling the bank always takes 45 minutes and one existential crisis. Noted. And here's another trick. Track actual time spent. Not forever, just for a week or so. Compare what you thought versus what happened. You'll notice the gap. It'll hurt a little. But it's the first step toward wiser planning. It's also a great way to develop task empathy, for future you, who has to live with your schedule. When you get better at estimating time, your to-do list becomes kinder. Not easier, but fairer. It respects your limits. It reflects your reality. It stops punishing you for things you couldn't have known and starts helping you make peace with what's actually doable. Let's take an example. Say you plan your day like this. Write presentation, 1 hour. Grocery run, 30 minutes. Clean kitchen, 20 minutes. Watch course video, 45 minutes. But the reality turns out to be: write presentation, 2 hours. Grocery run, 1 hour, plus bumping into Carol from high school. Clean kitchen, skipped because of said Carol. Watch course video, fell asleep halfway. Does that mean you're lazy or unproductive? Nope. Just a human underestimating complexity and overestimating stamina. When you correct that mental math, your lists become less about squeezing life into a box and more about flowing through it intentionally. And the best part? Once you stop overloading your list, something magical happens. You finish it. You get to the end of the day and everything's crossed off. You feel accomplished, not drained. You're not chasing some impossible fantasy version of yourself, you're honoring the real one. Little joke break. Have you ever written, relax, on your to-do list and then stressed out about whether you're doing it correctly? Yep. That's the planning fallacy's evil twin, expectation inflation. But more on that in a later section. For now, remember, your list isn't about perfection. It's a mirror, not a measuring stick. And when you see time clearly, you start working with your brain instead of against it. Which brings us to a trickier inner battle, the one between ambition and anxiety. When tasks pile up, and perfectionism kicks in, it's easy to freeze. But your list can become the bridge out of that freeze. Let's explore how perfectionism and paralysis meet their match with a pen and paper. Perfectionism is a sneaky little beast. It wears a mask that says, high standards, or, I just want to do my best, but underneath? It's often fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of starting and not being good enough. And nothing amplifies that fear faster than a blank slate and a mountain of unstructured tasks. This is where your to-do list steps in, not just as a productivity tool, but as a gentle psychological lifeline. You might not think of it this way, but the very act of writing something down, imperfectly, is already an act of defiance against perfectionism. Why? Because it turns vague pressure into concrete action. Get life together becomes sort laundry. Become successful becomes apply to one job. The list doesn't just organize your day. It organizes your fears. A mainstream study out of the University of Bath explored the connection between perfectionism and procrastination. The researchers found that perfectionists often avoid tasks not because they're lazy, but because the internal standard is so high that any action feels doomed to fall short. That's paralysis. But when tasks are broken down, even perfectionists find it easier to engage. You've probably experienced this. The mental block around a task is huge, towering. But then you write it down. Break it into steps. Suddenly, it looks doable. Manageable. You trick your brain into realizing, oh, this isn't an impossible mountain. It's just 4 annoying hills. And here's where things get interesting. Your to-do list doesn't just record tasks, it reshapes your self-talk. Draft outline feels safer than write perfect report. Test logo colors is gentler than design flawless brand. When you phrase your tasks in forgiving, iterative language, you give yourself permission to start, without being amazing from the first click. There remains considerable disagreement about whether perfectionism is an inborn trait or a learned behavior. Some psychologists argue it stems from early expectations, parents, school, societal pressure. Others see it as a coping mechanism. If you control the outcome, you won't feel vulnerable. Regardless of its roots, the impact is the same, inaction dressed up as idealism. And a to-do list? It breaks that spell. You might find this surprising. In the world of software development, there's a methodology called Agile, where teams work in short, focused sprints. Tasks are divided into tiny, manageable units. Perfection is never the goal, iteration is. You deliver, reflect, improve. It's a system designed to prevent the overwhelm of huge expectations. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? This approach works because the smaller the task, the less threatening it feels. You're not committing to excellence forever. You're just doing the next tiny thing. That's where the list becomes not just a manager, but a therapist. An interesting aside, Leonardo da Vinci's journals, often considered the first to-do lists in Western history, were filled with wild, imperfect, often chaotic entries like draw Milan, calculate weight of a bird's wing, and get leather for shoes. No deadlines, no perfect handwriting, no pressure. Just curious, imperfect motion. If it worked for Leo, it might just work for you. Now let's talk about the frozen brain feeling. You know it, the loop of I should do something, followed by, but what if I do it wrong, which quickly becomes, maybe I'll just scroll for a bit. That's paralysis. It's not laziness. It's a fear reaction, and your nervous system is trying to protect you from imagined failure. When you pick up a pen and list even the tiniest action, open file, check email, name the document, you're bypassing the fear circuit. You're giving your brain a path out of freeze mode. No, it's not always glamorous. But it's real, effective, and incredibly human. Here's a simple tip. When you're stuck in perfectionist paralysis, start your list with one task you can definitely complete in 30 seconds. Literally. Clean glasses. Plug in laptop. Close 3 tabs. Doing that one thing resets your internal thermostat. It breaks the freeze. It says, hey, I can move. And when you do move, celebrate. Check that box with drama. Draw a little star. Do a victory dance in your chair. Your brain registers the action as meaningful, and starts shifting its default from freeze to flow. Little joke break. You ever write, make list, at the top of your list, just to check it off instantly? You might laugh, but that's not cheating. That's rehearsal. That's you easing into motion, giving your brain a little warm-up lap. Also, don't underestimate the power of imperfect tracking. Some people avoid to-do lists because they feel they'll do it wrong. As if there's a productivity police force checking for pen color violations. Spoiler alert, there isn't. If your list is messy, scratched out, filled with coffee stains, it's still a victory. Because it means you're moving. Your to-do list doesn't judge. It doesn't need to be aesthetic. It just needs to exist. And as you build that imperfect momentum, something beautiful starts happening: self-trust. You begin to believe, quietly, that you can handle things. That you don't need to be perfect to take action. That done is not only better than perfect, it's the only way anything ever gets done. So next time you stare at a blank list and freeze, don't wait for inspiration. Don't wait for clarity. Just write anything. The moment ink hits paper, you're winning. Because you're no longer trapped in your own mind, you're walking through it. And as those small imperfect steps begin to stack up, you'll find yourself needing a new kind of skill: prioritization. Because not all tasks are equal. Some just feel urgent. Others are important. And learning the difference? That's where your list becomes a scalpel instead of a shovel. By now, your list isn't just a random inventory of chores and half-forgotten errands. It's starting to feel like something more strategic, like a personal game plan. But here's the next layer: not everything on your list is worth equal attention. Some tasks are urgent but meaningless. Others are subtle but life-changing. Learning to tell the difference? That's where prioritization steps in. Let's start with a harsh truth: if everything is important, then nothing is. Your list can become a noisy crowd of competing voices, all shouting for your time. And unless you decide who gets the microphone, your day will choose for you, and probably not kindly. One of the most powerful tools in your prioritization toolkit is the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule. It's the idea that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. It originated with economist Vilfredo Pareto, who noticed that 80% of Italy's land was owned by 20% of the population. Since then, it's been applied to everything from sales to time management. On your to-do list, this means, not every task will move the needle equally. Answering 10 emails might feel productive, but writing your client proposal or launching the landing page could deliver 10x the results. Your job: identify the high-impact 20% and protect it with your life. Mainstream research from McKinsey & Company has shown that knowledge workers who consciously prioritize deep work over shallow tasks report higher productivity, less burnout, and greater job satisfaction. The list becomes less about volume and more about value. But here's where it gets tricky: your brain isn't great at intuitively spotting value. It's wired to respond to urgency, not importance. The blinking notification. The unread email. The last-minute request. It's why replying to someone's "Hey, quick question" feels more urgent than spending an hour building your dream career. There remains considerable disagreement among cognitive scientists about whether humans are naturally rational prioritizers or reactive responders. Some believe our frontal cortex gives us excellent strategic capacity. Others argue our attention systems are hijacked by emotional immediacy. Either way, your list is the battlefield, and prioritization is your shield. So how do you prioritize wisely? One method is the Eisenhower matrix, named after President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who famously said, "What is important is seldom urgent and what is urgent is seldom important." The matrix divides tasks into 4 quadrants. Urgent and important, do now. Important but not urgent, schedule it. Urgent but not important, delegate or limit. Neither urgent nor important, delete or defer. You can sketch this directly onto your to-do list. Suddenly, that thing you've been obsessing over might land squarely in the "why am I even doing this?" category. And then there's the 2-minute rule, made popular by productivity expert David Allen. If something takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. Why? Because the time you spend organizing or rescheduling it is often longer than the task itself. It's low-hanging fruit for a reason: grab it and move on. You might find this surprising: the average worker spends over 25% of their time just reading and answering emails. Not solving problems, not creating value, but managing communication. If your to-do list isn't helping you filter that noise, it's amplifying it. Here's a simple prioritization exercise. Before you start your day, scan your list and ask, if I only did one thing today that truly mattered, what would it be? That task? That's your priority. Star it. Box it. Tattoo it on your forehead if you must. And then protect it. A noteworthy nuance: Richard Branson reportedly carries multiple notebooks and reorganizes his to-dos constantly, re-ranking them based on impact, not effort. The man runs hundreds of companies, so clearly the system's doing something right. Now, let's be honest, prioritization takes emotional discipline. Sometimes the most important task is the hardest, and your brain will happily shuffle papers and clean drawers to avoid it. That's where the list becomes your accountability partner. It says, hey, you said this was the main thing. Let's not break that trust. And yes, your priorities will shift. That's natural. A sudden deadline, an unexpected call, a wave of exhaustion, life has opinions. But if you revisit your list once or twice a day, you can adjust while staying anchored to what matters. Drift happens. The list brings you back. Here's another trick: time your tasks to your energy. Some people are morning machines. Others peak at 3 p.m. Some do their best creative thinking at midnight while surrounded by snacks. Pair high priority work with your high energy windows. Your brain will thank you. Little joke break: ever finish all your easy tasks first, then reward yourself by avoiding the hard one until tomorrow? That's not prioritizing. That's procrastination wearing a productivity costume. Cute, but transparent. This is why themed task blocks can help. Monday equals admin, Tuesday equals creative. Wednesday equals meetings. You group tasks by vibe, not just urgency. It helps your brain gear up and reduces the task switching tax, that little productivity cost your brain pays every time it shifts gears. And yes, there's a dark side to prioritization too. What if you always put yourself last? Rest gets buried. Health gets postponed. Joy doesn't even make the cut. This is why your list should never be purely utilitarian. Include one nourishing task. Just one. Take walk. Call mom. Sit quietly with coffee. Priority isn't only about output. It's about input, too. So as you sit with your list, try not to ask, what can I get done? Ask instead, what matters today? That shift, subtle as it is, turns your list from a grind into a guide. And when you start aligning your tasks with meaning, you begin to notice something strange. Certain times of day, or days of the week, just feel more powerful. Like fresh starts. Like hidden windows of motivation. What's going on there? It's time to explore the surprising power of temporal landmarks and why your to-do list loves a Monday. There's something oddly magical about a Monday morning. Or the first of the month. Or a birthday. Or even, weirdly, a rainy Tuesday that smells like beginnings. It's like the air shifts and suddenly, your brain whispers, let's try again. Psychologists call these moments temporal landmarks, and your to-do list is secretly powered by them. A temporal landmark is any date, time, or moment that your brain categorizes as a natural divider, an opportunity to psychologically reset and start fresh. Think of them as mental bookmarks that separate, then, from the now. And they hold more sway over your motivation than you probably realize. One mainstream study out of the Wharton School introduced the term the fresh start effect. Researchers found that people are significantly more likely to pursue goals, start a gym habit, begin a new project, eat fewer flaming hot cheese snacks, right after temporal landmarks. Mondays. Firsts. Birthdays. Even after holidays or personal setbacks. Why? Because your brain loves a story. Temporal landmarks give you the narrative structure of the before and after. What happened yesterday is the old version of you. And today is a clean slate. Your to-do list, then, becomes a kind of declaration: this is who I am now. There remains considerable disagreement about how long the fresh start effect lasts. Some researchers believe its power fades quickly, like a New Year's resolution abandoned by February 2nd. Others argue that when paired with structured action, like a clear, written list, it can catalyze real behavior change over weeks or even months. The science is still swirling, but one thing's clear: fresh starts feel real, even if they aren't. A minor yet intriguing point: studies have found a spike in marathon signups right after people turn ages ending in 9, like 29 or 39. It's as if the looming decade marker slaps the brain and says, better do something meaningful before the clock resets. That's a temporal landmark in full psychological bloom. Your to-do list doesn't just benefit from these moments, it can amplify them. When you write a list on the first day of the month, your brain attaches more weight to those intentions. It sees them as part of a new chapter. The list becomes more than just tasks. It becomes a prologue. And here's where it gets fascinating: you can manufacture your own temporal landmarks. You don't have to wait for January 1st. You can decide that every Monday is a reset. That the 15th of the month is your personal check-in day. That your birthday is your annual life audit. It's a mental frame, not a cosmic law. So try this: add a little ritual to your weekly planning. Sunday night or Monday morning. Light a candle, cue the lo-fi playlist, and spend 10 minutes writing your tasks. Not just what you have to do, but what you want to move forward. Frame it as a chapter opening. The tone of the week is being set. And you're the author. You might find this surprising: your brain is more likely to remember information tied to time-based emotional cues. This means that if you habitually write goals or tasks around key time markers, start of spring, end of summer, after the breakup, you'll remember and act on them more effectively. Temporal anchoring isn't just poetic. It's psychological glue. Let's break it down further. Imagine writing your list on a totally random Wednesday versus writing it on New Year's Day. The list might be similar, but your brain's interpretation of it? Completely different. One feels routine. The other feels transformational. This is why people buy planners and fancy pens in December. It's not about ink, it's about identity. Even mini landmarks work. After lunch. After my shower. After I walk the dog. These are micro resets, tiny windows where your brain is primed to shift gears. Stack a task right after one of these, and you'll notice, it sticks better. Because your brain loves sequences. First this, then that. You're building rhythms, not rules. This is also where habit stacking comes in. Let's say you always make coffee in the morning. That's your landmark. Stack a task right after: while the coffee brews, review my list. Or, after coffee, send one important email. Over time, the landmark becomes a trigger. And your brain starts craving the rhythm. And yes, you can use this to reset anytime. Bad morning? Start fresh at lunch. Rough week? Begin again Thursday. There's no rule that says you can only start over on Mondays. Every moment you choose to pick up the pen again becomes a landmark. A flag planted in the shifting landscape of your life. Little joke break: honestly, sometimes all it takes to reset your mindset is changing your socks. New socks equals new life. Highly recommended. Here's another fun trick: create visual rituals for your landmarks. Use a gold pen on the first of the month. Write your big 3 goals on a sticky note and post it on your bathroom mirror. Designate a separate page in your journal just for Chapter 1, Style Planning. These sensory cues deepen the psychological weight of your intentions. But be careful, don't let the landmark become the goal itself. Buying a new planner won't change your life if it never leaves your drawer. The landmark creates space for action. The list fills that space. They need each other. So next time you feel stuck, look around. Is there a fresh start hiding in your calendar? A moment you can claim? Even something as simple as first sunny day in weeks can become your reset. Name it. Write the list. Step into the next chapter. And when you do that, when you start claiming small resets instead of waiting for big ones, you're taking emotional ownership of your time. And that, in turn, leads to a more stable, regulated sense of being. Because the list doesn't just organize your tasks. It stabilizes your mood. And that gentle emotional grounding? That's what we'll explore next. There's something quietly profound about seeing your life reduced to a few neat lines on a page. A scribbled list of call mom, schedule dentist, send invoice. It may not seem like much, but it's doing something powerful in the background. It's regulating your emotions. That's right. Your to-do list isn't just managing your day. It's helping you manage yourself. Let's begin with something you've likely felt. When life feels chaotic, unpredictable, or just a little too much, writing a list gives you a strange, soothing sense of control. Even if nothing is actually done yet, you feel better. It's not just psychological fluff. There's real neuroscience behind this. The human brain craves predictability. Your limbic system, which handles emotional responses, doesn't like open-ended stress. It wants to know what's coming, and how to respond. When things are uncertain, your stress hormones, especially cortisol, begin to rise. But give the brain structure, a plan, a list, and cortisol levels begin to decline. In a 2017 study from the University of California, researchers found that simply outlining a plan for managing upcoming responsibilities, especially when feeling overwhelmed, activated the prefrontal cortex and reduced emotional reactivity. Translation: when you write a to-do list, your rational brain steps in and tells your emotional brain, it's okay. We're taking care of it. That's why lists are often recommended in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. They're not just productivity tools, they're coping tools. They create microstructure in moments of mental chaos. A kind of emotional scaffolding. You might find this surprising. Even just pretending to have a plan can stabilize your nervous system. The act of listing things, even vaguely or provisionally, reduces mental noise and helps recenter your attention. You may not even follow the list, but it's the perception of structure that creates calm. There remains considerable disagreement about whether this emotional regulation effect is long-lasting or only temporary. Some psychologists argue that it's a form of emotional, white noise, a calming distraction rather than a real solution. Others suggest that the cumulative habit of list-making actually trains the brain to self-soothe through action. Either way, you get the relief, and that's the point. Here's a fun tidbit. Polar explorers in the early 20th century, stuck for weeks in icy isolation, often created elaborate daily schedules to maintain morale. Shave beard. Read Latin aloud. Reorganize gear. These lists weren't about survival, they were about sanity. When the world outside is unstable, internal structure becomes everything. And that applies to your world, too. When your inbox explodes, when your kids are yelling, when your brain is juggling 37 worries like a sleep-deprived circus act, writing down 5 things you can control isn't just smart. It's psychological first aid. Let's talk about the deeper function here. External regulation becomes internal regulation. At first, the list holds the structure. But over time, your brain starts internalizing that rhythm. It learns to calm down, organize itself, and move from reactive chaos to responsive clarity. One technique therapists use is what's called a daily anchor list. It's not a list of tasks so much as emotional touch points. 3 things you will do today that bring comfort, stability, or joy. Make tea. Walk outside. Talk to a friend. These aren't about productivity, they're about creating micro-rituals of grounding. And yes, they absolutely belong on your to-do list. So let's reframe the list for a moment. It's not just, get stuff done. It's, remind myself that I'm capable. It's, move my body when I feel anxious. It's, have a plan when my brain wants to spin out. Your list is a mirror, reflecting back not just your goals, but your needs. This is especially true during emotionally heavy seasons. Grief. Depression. Burnout. In those times, the list shrinks. Shower. Eat something. Text someone. That's not a failure, it's wisdom. A list can shrink to meet you where you are. And when it does, it says, this is enough. Little joke break, sometimes your list looks like this. 1. Cry. 2. Eat cookie. 3. Try again tomorrow. Valid. Extremely valid. Let's also acknowledge the flip side. When you don't make a list during tough times, things often feel worse. The mind spins faster. Tasks feel heavier. Nothing gets done, and then the guilt shows up wearing a cape, whispering, you're failing. But one little list? That's a cape for you. Here's another emotional insight. Checking off even the smallest task helps your brain complete emotional loops. This ties into the Zeigarnik effect, the idea that your brain holds onto unfinished tasks more intensely than completed ones. By checking off even one item, you signal closure. Your brain releases the worry it's been holding in the background. One less weight. And no, the task doesn't have to be noble or important. Put on real pants. Delete junk email. Wipe counter. All victories count. Because what matters emotionally is movement. You're not stuck. You're nudging forward. Another practical tip, if your emotions feel overwhelming, split your list in 2 columns. One side equals, must do. The other equals, would be nice. That way, your overwhelmed brain doesn't see everything as equally critical. It gives you permission to triage, to be human, to exhale. And if even that feels like too much, try one thing now, one thing later. That's it. Your list becomes a whisper, not a shout. You meet yourself where you are. The goal isn't domination. It's self-compassion. So when your emotions feel like a storm and your thoughts scatter like birds, come back to something simple, a list. A little square of order in the chaos. It won't fix everything, but it'll give you a foothold. And sometimes, that's all you need. And once those emotions begin to settle, another question starts to surface. Not how to get things done, but why some undone things haunt you more than others. That lingering sense of incompletion? That's where we meet the strange, haunting power of open loops and the illusion of closure. You've probably experienced it, that nagging little task you didn't do. Call the doctor, respond to that one email, fix the thing that's been squeaking for 3 weeks, lurking in the back of your mind like a sitcom character who won't leave the party. It's not screaming. It's just there. Always. Quietly judging you. This is the psychological phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik effect, and it might be one of the strangest, and most persistent, forces behind your to-do list obsession. Back in the 1920s, Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik noticed something odd while sitting in a cafe in Vienna. Waiters could remember orders that were still in progress with eerie precision. But once the bill was paid, gone. Completely forgotten. Curious, she dug deeper. Her conclusion: the human brain tends to remember unfinished tasks more vividly than completed ones. Why? Because your brain hates open loops. Think of an open loop as an unresolved narrative. A tab that never got closed. An itch your brain keeps reaching for, even if it can't quite scratch it. Your to-do list, in this context, is more than a planner, it's a closure machine. Every checkbox is a psychological door gently clicking shut. Mainstream psychology research has supported Zeigarnik's original observations. Studies have shown that uncompleted goals continue to occupy cognitive bandwidth. In other words, until you write it down, cross it out, or do it, your brain will keep tossing it back into your conscious awareness like a persistent cat pawing at your face at 3 a.m. You might find this surprising. It's not just real tasks that haunt you, imagined tasks do, too. Even thinking about doing something without resolution can cause mental fatigue. Your brain starts allocating resources as if the task is already in motion. That's why your day can feel heavy before you've actually done anything. And here's where your list saves the day. Writing the task down creates cognitive closure. Not because the task is done, but because your brain sees it safely stored. The loop is still open, but it's anchored. Your brain says, okay, we've got it on file. And it can finally stop circling that mental runway. There remains considerable disagreement about how long the Zeigarnik effect influences your working memory. Some say it fades once the task is externalized. Others argue the loop stays open until full completion. Still others suggest it varies based on emotional salience, how much the task matters to you. Either way, your brain doesn't forget what's unfinished. It just files it under, return to later. Just a quirky detail. Screenwriters and novelists often use this psychological quirk to their advantage. Ever notice how most episodes end with a cliffhanger? Or how chapters break right before something big happens? That's the Zeigarnik effect weaponized, creating a loop your brain needs to close. Except now you're binge-watching until 2 a.m. The irony? Your own life operates on the same loop. Except instead of cliffhangers, it's renew passport and buy birthday card. The stakes may be lower, but the brain's response is eerily similar. Until there's closure, you're mentally tethered. And when your list gets long, that's a lot of loops. A dozen browser tabs open in your mind. Which explains why long, chaotic to-do lists often make you feel more anxious, not less. The trick isn't just writing the list, it's managing the loops. Here's one strategy: use symbols to categorize your tasks by status. A simple dash for open, a duck for in progress, a check for done. You're not just organizing, you're tracking narrative resolution. Your brain sees visual progress, not just chaos. Another trick? Keep an incompletion journal. Sounds dramatic, but it's not. At the end of the day, jot down the things you didn't get to, and why. Not as punishment, but as closure. You tell your brain, yes, we didn't get to it. Yes, we're aware. No, we're not failing. The loop tightens, even if it doesn't close. Little joke break: if the Zeigarnik effect had a theme song, it would probably be that Jeopardy! Timer tune on endless loop. Did you reply to that message? Did you? Mental games show, every day. Now, let's talk about the dark twin of the open loop, the illusion of completion. That's when you think you're done, so your brain relaxes, even if the job's only half finished. It's the reason you stop midway through cleaning because you vacuumed one room and decided, that's good enough. Your to-do list can accidentally reinforce this illusion. Cross off, start taxes, and your brain celebrates like you filed them. Which is cute. And also kind of problematic. This is why specificity matters. Instead of start taxes, write gather income documents or schedule CPA call. Each small, clear action creates an honest loop, with an honest ending. Here's something else: your list should reflect loops you want to keep open. Not every open loop is bad. Some are passion projects. Ongoing goals. Evolving intentions. The trick is to flag them as active journeys, not unfinished business. Write book, chapter 1, started, is less haunting than write book, floating endlessly with no progress. This is how the best lists work. They don't just show what's done. They narrate what's happening. What's in motion. What's paused. Your brain doesn't just want tasks completed, it wants stories resolved. And here's the deeper truth: your brain tracks incomplete identities, too. Not just do taxes, but be responsible. Not just start gym routine, but be healthy. Your to-do list becomes a bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. Every checkmark is a small step toward closing a gap you might not even realize you're feeling. So when you feel mentally drained without having done much, check your list. Ask yourself, what loops are still open? What can I close? You may not finish everything. But even closing one loop can create psychological space. And that space? That emotional breath? It makes room for something deeper, a sense of self. Because what you list, what you repeat, what you choose to prioritize, it's not just logistics. It's a quiet reflection of who you think you are. And as we drift into that realization, we arrive at an unexpected question. What does your list say about you, not just your tasks, but your identity? Let's step into the fascinating world of social identity, self-perception, and how your to-do list is quietly curating your story. So you're sitting there, scanning your list. Pay phone bill. Finish deck for Thursday. Finally call that friend back. On the surface, it looks ordinary, just another inventory of things to do. But beneath it, your to-do list is quietly building something far more intimate, a version of you. That's right. Your list is shaping your identity. Psychologists call this phenomenon self-signaling, the idea that your actions, and even your intended actions, send messages to yourself about who you are. When you repeatedly write down certain tasks, meditate, write chapter, meal prep, volunteer, you're not just managing time. You're reinforcing a specific narrative. I am someone who does this. Your to-do list, in other words, becomes a low-key resume of your inner values. And over time, that resume tells you, and the world, who you are. There's a fascinating study from Stanford University that found people are more likely to follow through on actions when those actions align with an identity they've already claimed. For example, people were more likely to vote when told, be a voter, rather than simply, go vote. Subtle shift. Huge impact. The implication? Behavior follows identity. And your list is a sneaky way to solidify that identity day by day. There remains considerable disagreement among scholars about whether identity drives action, or action builds identity. It's a bit of a chicken and egg puzzle. But most agree on this: repeated actions, even micro-choices, build the scaffolding of who you believe you are. And that scaffolding? It's right there in your planner. You might find this surprising. The way you word tasks actually influences how your brain perceives your role in the world. Writing, go to gym, versus, train like an athlete, hits differently. Clean kitchen, versus, reset my space. One is a chore. The other is a statement. The list becomes a reflection, not just of what you do, but what you believe about yourself. And then there's the social layer, performed identity. That's the version of your list that isn't just for you. It's curated, even subconsciously, for how others see you. Maybe you post your bullet journal online. Or you keep a pristine digital system you know you'll be asked about in a meeting. Or you casually mention, yeah, it's on my Asana board, just to flex a little bit. This isn't necessarily vanity, it's deeply human. We want our habits to be legible to others. We want our effort to be witnessed. And the list becomes part performance, part declaration. You're saying, this is who I want to be seen as. Productive. Focused. Responsible. Creative. An interesting aside, Benjamin Franklin kept a highly structured to-do list and moral ledger every day, not just to manage his schedule, but to shape his character. He tracked virtues like frugality, humility, and cleanliness, assigning them tasks and tallying transgressions. His list wasn't about errands, it was about becoming a better person. Your digital checklist is looking pretty chill by comparison. Let's also talk about the version of you that doesn't get things done. You know the feeling, you didn't do half the list. You moved things forward. You forgot a few. And somehow, it colors your self-perception. You feel less, on top of things. Less capable. Less like the idealized version of yourself. This is why how you react to an incomplete list matters just as much as how you build it. If your list becomes a metric for worth, you're setting yourself up to feel constantly behind. But if it becomes a reflection of direction, of intention, you're reclaiming authorship. Little joke break: if your to-do list says, be perfect, and you still haven't crossed it off by Friday, join the club. The line's long, but at least we're all in it together. Here's a gentle truth: your to-do list can serve as a kind of memoir in progress. Glance back at your lists from last month. What patterns repeat? What kinds of tasks never seem to get done? What things quietly disappear without ever being checked off? Those gaps. Those loops. They're not failures. They're data. Maybe that task wasn't aligned with who you are right now. Maybe it was someone else's expectation. Or maybe it was a version of you that existed in theory, but not in practice. And you're allowed to revise the story. Because identity isn't static. It evolves. So should your list. If your values shift, your priorities shift. And your tasks? They can shift too. If you've been writing, go back to school, for 2 years and never taken a step, maybe the real task is, figure out what I'm avoiding. Now the list becomes introspective. More mirror, less manual. This is also where lists become a way to rehearse transformation. You want to become a writer? Start listing writing tasks. Not just, write book, but write 200 words, by notebook, read 1 page of Stephen King's On Writing. Each task affirms, I'm already becoming this. The doing trains the being. Here's something else to notice. When people go through major life transitions, breakups, moves, career shifts, they often create a new system. A new planner. A new app. A new template. Why? Because the old system was built for a different self. The new list reflects a rebuilt identity. This is why it's powerful to occasionally ask, whose list am I writing? Is it yours? Your boss's? Your parents'? Instagram's? The answer can be sobering, but incredibly clarifying. You're not just managing time. You're curating selfhood. So what do you want your list to say about you? That you're capable? Creative? Curious? Focused? The tasks may be mundane, but the story they tell? Anything but. And the format you choose, analog, digital, color-coded, minimalist, becomes a layer of that identity too. Which brings us, naturally, into the interface debate. Paper versus digital. Leather journal versus Google Calendar. There's more going on here than preference. There's psychology at play. So, you've figured out that your to-do list isn't just a tool, it's a mirror, a mood stabilizer, a storybook of who you think you are. But now comes the practical question, where do you keep that story? On paper? On your phone? In a slick productivity app with 17 views and a dark mode? Or in a bullet journal filled with little banners, checkboxes, and washi tape dreams? Welcome to the great interface debate, digital versus paper. And while it might sound like a matter of taste, this choice can actually influence your focus, memory, motivation, and even your emotional relationship with productivity. Let's start with digital. Apps like Todoist, Notion, Things 3, TickTick, or even Google Tasks offer a sleek experience. You can sync across devices. You can set reminders, color code by category, link tasks to calendar events, even nest subtasks into delightful little layers of productivity lasagna. The benefits are obvious: flexibility, speed, automation. You can reschedule things with a swipe. Tasks don't get lost. You don't have to carry a notebook, and let's be honest, you're already on your phone 400 times a day, so might as well make some of those swipes productive. Mainstream cognitive psychology studies show that digital tools enhance retrieval efficiency, meaning you can find what you're looking for faster, especially with search functions and tagging. Plus, notifications help keep you accountable, like a tiny digital coach who never sleeps. But here's the trade-off: while digital lists are efficient, they don't always stick in your memory. That's because typing doesn't engage your brain the same way as writing. Research from Princeton and UCLA has shown that handwriting activates more regions of the brain associated with learning, processing, and recall. Writing forces your mind to slow down, make decisions, and encode information more deeply. You're not just storing the task, you're engaging with it. This is why paper lists often feel more personal, more real. You remember them better. You're more emotionally invested. There's something grounding about scribbling, pick up milk, and then drawing a dramatic line through it when you finally do. You might find this surprising. In one quirky study, participants who handwrote their to-do lists were less likely to redelegate tasks or procrastinate than those who used apps. The theory? Paper feels more like a commitment. There's a tactile, sensory component that digital can't quite replicate. There remains considerable disagreement about which method fosters better follow-through. Some say digital helps you stay on track because it integrates with your calendar and sends reminders. Others argue that physical lists produce more intentionality. You're less likely to mindlessly re-snooze a handwritten task. A small but fascinating detail: Ernest Hemingway made daily to-do lists by hand, even while traveling, and he'd sometimes burn them after the day was done, his way of ritualizing closure. Admittedly dramatic, but hey, he was Hemingway. Let's break down a few psychological advantages of each. Digital pros: fast editing and reordering, searchable archives, recurring tasks and reminders, easy syncing across platforms, visually dynamic if customized well. Paper pros: better memory encoding, reduced distraction, no pop-ups, satisfying tactile feedback, more creative freedom, doodles, symbols, emotion. Feels more intentional and grounding. Of course, it's not either/or. Many people use hybrid systems. Maybe you write your daily list on paper each morning but track long-term goals in Notion or Trello. Maybe your weekly plan lives in your bullet journal, but your grocery list lives on your phone. Little joke break: ever write a list on paper and then input it into an app, or vice versa? That's called double listing, and while it sounds inefficient, it's actually just your brain begging for structure in stereo. Here's the real kicker: it's not just the format, it's the relationship you have with your system. If your app stresses you out with 40 overdue red notifications, it's not serving you. If your journal is beautiful but gathering dust because it feels too pretty to ruin, it's not helping either. So, ask yourself: which system do I actually check? Which one makes me feel calm when I use it? Which one reflects how I naturally think and remember? Also consider your lifestyle context. If you're always on the move, digital might make more sense. If you're at a desk most days, a notebook could offer a comforting pause. If your brain is a chaotic tornado of tabs, maybe a mix gives you both structure and flexibility. Another bonus of paper: physical boundaries. Your notebook doesn't buzz. It doesn't update itself. It stays quietly on your desk, waiting. That sense of stillness can be a gift, especially in a world that's constantly pinging you. On the other hand, digital systems can help with habit tracking, data logging, and goal visualization in ways paper can't. There are apps that gamify your productivity, track your mood alongside your list, and offer pretty little charts that tell you you're a functional adult. For some people, that's deeply motivating. Just be mindful not to let the tool become the task. Choosing fonts, designing your layout, importing emoji bullet points, these are fun, but they're not progress. The list is there to serve your life, not become your life. And remember, your system will evolve. It's okay to outgrow your tools. To try paper for a while, then switch back. To go minimalist this month, then full color-coded chaos next month. Your list doesn't have to be loyal to one format forever, it just needs to work for you. So whether it's a Post-it, a Moleskine, or a Kanban board with 6 automations, the most powerful to-do list is the one you return to, daily, gently, imperfectly. But as much as lists can help, there's a limit. A danger zone. Because if we're not careful, what started as a helpful tool becomes a judgment device. A place where unfinished tasks turn into shame. And that, my friend, is where we meet the shadow side of tracking it all. By now, your to-do list might feel like an old friend. It helps you move forward, stay grounded, stay you. But even the best of friends can turn on you if the relationship becomes unhealthy. And yes, there is such a thing as list fatigue. That's the dark side of productivity, when tracking your life begins to feel like it's tracking you. When every unchecked box whispers, not enough, and even rest starts to feel like a task you haven't properly completed. Sound familiar? Let's name the feeling: list guilt. That subtle weight you carry when tasks linger day after day, when half your list migrates untouched to tomorrow's page for the 4th time, and when you start to look at your planner not with relief, but with resentment. List guilt is sneaky because it wears the disguise of responsibility. I should do more. I should be better. I should stop falling behind. But often, this guilt doesn't reflect failure, it reflects unrealistic expectations. You're setting the bar at robot with no emotions or bodily needs, and feeling bad for being human. Mainstream research from the University of Scranton, yes, real place, not just the office, has found that only 8% of people actually keep their New Year's resolutions. That means 92% of us struggle to follow through, and often feel worse about ourselves in the process. The problem isn't laziness. It's unsustainable pressure. And your to-do list, if unchecked, becomes the vessel for that pressure. There remains considerable disagreement about whether constant self-tracking improves well-being or erodes it. Some researchers claim that monitoring increases motivation and builds momentum. Others argue that it heightens self-criticism and reduces spontaneity, especially when goals are extrinsically driven. The debate is ongoing, but the emotional fatigue is real. You might find this surprising. Some productivity experts suggest taking a list vacation every so often. That's right, a break from planning altogether. A day or weekend where you let yourself float. Choose tasks intuitively. Let go of structure. It's a way to reset your internal compass and prove to yourself that structure is a support, not a leash. Something you might not expect. There's a psychological concept called ego depletion, which proposes that your ability to make decisions and regulate yourself declines with overuse. In simpler terms, if you're constantly choosing between 30 tasks a day, even thinking about them becomes exhausting. Your willpower gets tired. The list becomes heavy. Let's talk about list bloat. This happens when your list becomes so long, so detailed, so overambitious that it stops helping and starts overwhelming. If you've ever had a list with 40+ items, some of which haven't been relevant since last Tuesday, you know this one. The solution? Pruning. You don't need to do everything. You need to do what matters now. One helpful trick is the deadweight drop. Cross out 3 tasks today that you won't do. Not delay. Not reschedule. Just eliminate. Watch your brain breathe. Then there's perfectionist paralysis, that old familiar freeze. When your list becomes so perfectly formatted, so intricately color-coded, so aesthetically curated that you're afraid to mess it up. Suddenly you're managing the system instead of managing your life. And ironically, that can keep you stuck. Little joke break, ever spend more time designing your planner than using it? That's not productivity. That's stationary cosplay. No shame. We've all been there. Washi tape is powerful. Here's something deeper. Over-reliance on lists can weaken internal motivation. If you can't act unless something's written down, you may start feeling disconnected from your inner compass. The spontaneity fades. The joy of, I feel like doing this, gives way to, well, it's on the list, so I guess I have to. This is where you want to rebalance. Use your list as a guide, not a ruler. A sketch, not a blueprint. If you feel like dancing instead of replying to emails today, maybe that's wisdom, not avoidance. The goal is a life you want, not a checklist you fear. One way to keep the list light? Celebrate, done enough. That means recognizing effort even if the result wasn't perfect. Wrote half the draft? Done enough. Folded some laundry? Done enough. Took one walk around the block when you meant to go to the gym? You showed up. That counts. Try this exercise. At the end of the day, write down 3 things you did, even if they weren't on the original list. This turns the spotlight away from failure and back onto action. You might be doing more than you realize. And if you notice that your list includes things like, apologize for being behind, or, catch up on everything I failed to do, pause. Ask, would I say this to a friend? If the answer is no, don't say it to yourself. Your list isn't a courtroom. It's a map. Also, remember this, rest is productive. Sleep is regenerative. Fun is fuel. Quiet is data processing. If you don't write rest on your list now and then, you might start believing it's not allowed. And that's how burnout begins. Just like any relationship, your connection with your list needs care. Review it. Revise it. Forgive it. And sometimes, release it. Because the ultimate purpose of a to-do list is not control. It's not to prove your worth. It's not to impress anyone. It's to give structure to your transformation, to help you build a life aligned with your values, your pace, your story. And now, as we enter the final stretch of our journey together, it's time to zoom out. To look not just at tasks and tactics, but at the bigger picture. The way a consistent list, flawed and real and scribbled and sacred, can change the arc of a life. You've come a long way, from scribbled notes on a napkin to brain chemistry, self-image, dopamine loops, and even the deep emotional labor of crossing things off. But now, it's time to pull back. Not to the daily view or the weekly spread, but to the life-level zoom. The ultimate promise of a to-do list isn't about getting stuff done. It's about becoming. Because when used intentionally, a to-do list stops being a task tracker and becomes a personal transformation engine. You start out listing errands, meetings, workouts. But before long, patterns emerge. Recurring intentions. Unchecked dreams. Habits you return to over and over, without fanfare. Those tasks start to tell a story. A story about the life you're building, line by line, week by week. Think about it, you write, practice Spanish, and that's a task. But if you write it often enough, it's a habit. And if you reflect on it later, it's an identity. You are now a person who practices Spanish. The act may be small, but its repetition is transformational. This is how lists become identity engines. Repetition breeds belief. A single task doesn't change much, but stacking hundreds of micro-choices builds your character the way bricks build a house. You glance back at your old notebooks, and you don't just see what you did. You see who you were trying to become. Mainstream psychological research on habit formation shows that consistent, intentional repetition, especially when attached to a system like a daily list, has a compounding effect. Not just on productivity, but on confidence, emotional regulation, and resilience. The list doesn't just change your days. It rewrites your trajectory. There remains considerable disagreement about whether external systems like to-do lists can lead to deep, internal transformation without conscious reflection. Some argue that without awareness, lists become mechanical, checklists without meaning. Others suggest that action creates reflection. That by doing, we learn. That by listing, we become. You might find this surprising. Studies have shown that people who keep track of their daily intentions, even if they don't complete them all, report higher levels of hope and future orientation. That's right. Not just got things done, but felt better about tomorrow. Because your list is a low-stakes rehearsal for becoming the person you want to be. Think of it like this: write one paragraph today, might seem small. But it's more than progress, it's proof. Proof that you showed up. That you honored the idea. That you nudged the story forward. These moments matter. Over time, they become a self you trust. And trust is what it all comes down to. You don't need the perfect system. You don't need productivity hacks or gold stars. You just need to learn to trust yourself, to do what you said you'd do. To rewrite the story where you're the one in motion. Your list becomes a container for that trust. A visible place where intention meets action. Little joke break: at some point, your list may start to include wild aspirations like, become a morning person, or, sort emotional trauma before Tuesday. Ambitious. But hey, every journey starts with a checkbox. Now here's a thought: maybe your to-do list has already changed your life. You just haven't paused long enough to notice. Maybe the reason you're calmer, more organized, less overwhelmed, more you, is because you kept writing. Kept returning. Kept choosing action over inertia, clarity over chaos. And yes, there will be weeks where the list gets messy. Where nothing gets crossed off. Where goals slide, and energy drops, and everything feels like a slog. That's okay. Because the real list is not what's on the paper. It's in you. The habit. The rhythm. The inner voice that says, let's try again. That's how transformation happens. Not in bursts. Not with dramatic change. But with small, quiet consistency. A fun twist: when astronauts return to Earth, their daily systems shift completely, but many of them bring simple checklists back with them. It's a way of regrounding. Of saying, okay, I'm human again. Let's build a day. You don't need to go to space to need structure. You just need a life. So as we wrap this up, look at your current list, wherever it lives. It's not just tasks. It's a map. A memory. A moment of clarity. And maybe, just maybe, it's a gentle revolution in motion. You're not just organizing your life. You're rewriting it. With each checkmark. With each moment of showing up. With each decision to keep going. And that deserves some rest. So now, let's set the list down. The pen, the app, the digital dashboard, they'll all be there tomorrow. But tonight, there's nothing left to organize. Nothing to fix. No checkbox left undone that matters more than the simple fact that you're here. You've already done enough. Breathe in softly. Let your shoulders relax. Let your thoughts drift, not toward what still needs doing, but toward everything you've already carried, managed, survived. Even the smallest action today was a quiet triumph. Maybe you didn't do it all. Maybe you didn't even do most. But you showed up. You looked at the chaos and said, let's bring a little order. That matters. Let the weight of the list float a little now. Let it become something less demanding. Let it feel like a friend again. A quiet, helpful presence in your corner, not a judge, not a critic, not a scoreboard. The unfinished tasks. Let them go. They'll return if they need to. And if they don't, maybe they were never yours to carry in the first place. Tonight is for resetting. For remembering that you are not your productivity. You are not your inbox. You are not your goals. You are a human being who chose to be intentional. And that's more than enough. So exhale. Smile, if you can. Let the quiet return to your mind. And let your next list, whenever it comes, come from a place of peace. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together.